When an officer logs into the system, the very first screen that loads up will be their schedule. The block on the left is the calendar, and the details are in the area on the right. Looking at the calendar, any of the green arrows are indicating days off that were in the past. The red flags are days that are off in the future, and any of the gray blocks represent your schedule. Clicking on a particular block will take you to that particular day. You can see in this case we're looking at a 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. schedule, and by clicking on the details I could see that that's night in Squad A in a position of patrol. The screen is responsive, so if I were to shrink this down to say a cell phone size, everything will size accordingly, and the details for any of the particular days will just shift down and I can still see them on the screen. They'll size correctly. Another part of the screen is the communication area. So in the top right corner you could see in the envelope, which is a copy of your email, there's a notification. So clicking on that will open up, and this will let me know that there is a shift available for me to request. It is during the day, 8 to 12 on the 22nd, and it's for a road job for JCP&L at 10 Main Street. And it also lets me know that I have up until November 20th to make that request. So if I go back to my schedule, there's an option on the schedule to show the open shifts for request. So if I click Show Open Shifts, what will happen is over here on the calendar, any day with an open shift on it will have these dashed lines in it. So clicking on this will now take me to the 22nd. And on the right side of the screen, you'll see this icon here. Clicking on that icon will bring up that shift that I'm available to request. I can select it and click Submit, and this will send it to my superior officer for their decision whether or not to award the shift to me or not. Okay, one of the other things that I can do as an employee is request a day off. So let's say that on the 19th I'd like to request the day off. I can click on the hamburger menu in the top left corner and open the navigation panel and choose Request Time Off. This will load up a request calendar for me. I can now select the type of time off that I want to take. In this case, I want to take Kelly time, and then I would pick the date, the 19th, and click Start Request. I can then decide whether it's a full day or a partial day, where I would enter my from and to times. In this case, I'll request a full day. Why I'd like to take off. When I click Submit Request, this will now submit that request to my superior officer for approval. I could request to swap shifts on a day if there were no vacation days or personal days available for me. So let's say I wanted to swap shifts with somebody on the 14th. I could click on the 14th to go to my schedule, and right next to my night shift schedule is a little calendar icon. If I click on that, this is the swap request. So what it's going to do is look for people that are available to work my shift that have a reciprocal shift that I can work on the days from November 10th to November 16th in this scenario. So I can look down the list for somebody that I'd like to request, and maybe I've spoken to George and I want to give George a couple of options of dates that I would switch with him, so I can select multiple people if I wanted to by selecting Peggy and Ramona, or I could just request a couple shifts for George and give him the option to see if he'd be willing to switch any of those days with my time on the 14th. And when I click Submit Request, that is going to trigger a notification to George. And so those are the basic functions that you can do as an employee. Request time off, request shift swaps, view your schedule, and also, if needed, you could go to a timesheet and request additional pay. So if you go to your actual timesheet, in the top corner here are change requests. So let's say on a particular day you worked overtime and you wanted to get overtime and you needed to provide the reason, or you wanted to get comp time. You could say add extra pay. You could then select the date. So maybe it was Monday the 11th. You could select the earnings. So if you wanted overtime comp, you would select 1.5 comp election, or you could just simply say overtime. You could then have the option to select a reason. So it was case involvement or crash investigation. And then you would enter the amount of time. So maybe 2 hours. And then you could click submit your change. And then you could also, in a free-form field here, type in any needed information. So maybe it was crash document number 12345, and click request. And again, that will trigger a request to your superior officer for approval for payment. I've now logged in as George, and George would receive a notification that you wanted to swap shifts with him, and he would see the dates that you're offering to swap. And in the bell icon is his ability to react to that. So now he can decide which one of the 3 days, if any, he would like to. So maybe he would say, I'll switch with you on the 15th, and he'll click approve. Once George does the approval, this will now get routed to the superior officer for the final approval, which would result in the shift swap. I've now logged in as the superior officer, whose first screen could be a dashboard screen. And the dashboard has the ability to create charts from the various reports that are in the system. So a typical one might be today's squad count, where I could see the number of people who are in administration and the detective or dispatch bureaus, and who's in Squad B and Squad D today, the number of officers, and the total number of people in the shift. So I could see in this case there are 4 people in Squad B, 3 in patrol, and 1 sergeant. If I need to see the details behind that, I would just simply click on the block for that particular schedule, and it'll take me to the detail and the report behind it. And now I can see the names of the 3 officers that are working in Squad B on that day. To view the entire schedule, I can open the navigation panel, and under Schedules, click View Schedules, and pick the schedule that I would like to view. So in this case, I'd like to view the schedule that is current, which is the rotation from November 10th to November 23rd for me. And I've got different icons here, and as I mouse over them, it'll let you know the different views. So the most common are the view by day or the view by week. If I open up the view by week, November 10th to 16th, and who's on the day shift and who's on the night shift. If I need more detail, I can click on the chevron associated with a particular employee to see that it's a day shift and this person is a sergeant. But it's also color-coded, so I know that the light blue people are the sergeants in the shift. So visually, as I'm scanning across, the dark blue are my patrol officers, and the light blue are the sergeants for that particular shift. I can expand all the chevrons by using the big button in the header, or I can reduce everything for size purposes so that I can see everything across the screen. I can toggle between the week view and the day view. And the day view by default would go to today, and now I could see a little more detail about the number of people that are scheduled and the number of people required in a particular shift, and I would know whether I needed to bring people in or not. And I'd also again see further detail. If I needed to adjust the shift, let's say Laura was going to be leaving early and we were going to split the shift with somebody, I could just click on the shift and select Manage Shift. It'll now open up a box where I could start to make adjustments. So if it's just a time adjustment, I could adjust the from or the to time. If I'm actually going to split the shift, I can go on the shift timeline here to this ellipsis and select split shift. So you'll now see that there is a shift and a split shift here. Now to determine the attributes of that shift, I would make the change. So let's say this shift is going to end at 12 p.m. It starts at 7 and ends at 12. I scroll down further, it's the day patrol, and Laura is going to remain with that shift. If I click on the split shift, the shift from 12 to 7, the rest of the day, I might want to assign to another employee. If I click on the list, it'll bring up a list of all the available employees, which will show as qualified. So all these people meet the qualifications of the shift and are eligible. And the Others tab would show me anybody that's not eligible and why. Laura's already scheduled. This person doesn't have the correct skill. So going back to my qualified list, if I wanted to give that shift to Henrietta, I would select Henrietta and then click OK, which will populate her name into the shift. And clicking Save will then update the schedule. Anytime I update the schedule, the employee would receive notification of that. And now we can see that Laura's shift split from 7 to 12, and Henrietta is now working from 12 to 7. Looking at the notifications in the top left corner, I've received several emails as the supervisor. So one of which was the swap request between Nadine and George. Another one is Nadine's request for overtime for the crash investigation. Another one is Nadine's request for Kelly time. So these are examples and requests that Nadine may have requested an open shift. So these are all the notifications you would receive as a supervisor. And then to act on those items, you would go to your bell icon and you'd be able to make those decisions. So if I were to scroll down, for example, I could see that Rudy and Nadine have both requested that open shift on the 22nd. So once I decide who would get that shift, I can click approve. So in this case, maybe I'm going to give it to Nadine. And you'll notice that the shift for Rudy went away and it was automatically rejected. Okay. Here is Nadine's request for Kelly time. If I were to click approve for her time on the 19th, that is going to remove the shift from the day. And if I were to go back to our schedule, I'll now see on Tuesday the 19th that there is an open shift. And I can see here that Nadine is off on Kelly time. If I'd like to assign this shift, I can just click on it. And as you saw in the editing screen, click Manage Shift, go to the employee selection and select Employee. Alternatively, I could offer this shift to several people. So I can click on the shift and choose Post Shift. Ask the system for eligible employees of that shift. And then decide when I'd like to have that resolved by. So maybe 2 days before, I have the option to add a note, overtime shift, and click post. This would then send a notification to that employee that there is an overtime shift available for them if they would like it. Going back to our bell icon, I could see the overtime request for crash investigation from Nadine. And if I click on this, it would take me to her timesheet. So if you were clocking in and out, I could reference the times and maybe see on that day that she had stayed till 9 p.m., thus validating the 2 hours. So I can authorize that overtime. And again, to approve or reject the overtime request, I just click approve. And then finally, Nadine and George had that shift swap request, and I could see that they've agreed to it, that George has approved that he would do the 15th. So as long as I'm good with that, I would click approve. And that would then send notification back to the employees. I can now see the results of those changes. I'm no longer working on the 19th, that I'm off. I have a shift on the 22nd. And I also have all the email notifications when those things occurred. So here's my schedule change when I took that overtime shift. Here's that my shift swap was approved. Here's that my timesheet change request was approved. When my time off was granted on the 19th, I'm no longer working on that particular day. If I was unassigned from the schedule, I would get notification from that. And when there was a shift available for bid, as you saw before. So the employees will receive all of those notifications and then have the action items to view. And that's a quick preview of the scheduling software.